Hello, everyone. Welcome to PFY Live. And I'm your host, Amy Cummings here, Executive Director with Partnership for Youth, and where we come to you every week to share just some insights and helpful tips and also tools that you can use in your ministry with young people or just in your own personal life. Such as today, we have with us a very special guest, Kathryn Denuzzo, and she is from Wisconsin. She's a licensed counselor. She is an author. She's a speaker. She is the founder of Sacred Heart Mental Wellness, as well as a wife and a mother. And so welcome, Kathryn. So excited to have you here today.
Oh, I am so excited, but I gotta say something just because I think it'll make the listeners laugh. I'm actually from Beloit, Kansas, and we all came from Beloit, Wisconsin, like that's founded it. And so sometimes I'll order pizza and it never comes, and it's because I ordered it in Beloit, Wisconsin, and not Beloit, Kansas.
That is funny. Oh my gosh.
Small
Okay.
world, yes.
Sorry about that mistake, but that was great. Oh my gosh, Kathryn. Well, I am thrilled to be speaking with you today. I think that our world is suffering so much with anxiety, depression, and mental illness, not only our young people, but adults alike. So, first of all, just introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners today.
So I'm Kathryn Denuzzo, and I have been a counselor since 2006. I run an all digital, all Catholic practice. But yeah, and I do talks. I felt very early on in my life that the reason God called me to be a counselor was because people don't know that they're loved. They don't think that they're enough. And if you boil down most anxieties and fears, that they rest in that. And I just felt this beautiful call to let you know that you are loved and beautiful, how God created you. And so I have talked internationally from Asia to Europe, been on EWTN, worked with Focus. And what's very interesting to me is the more I learn and go around the world, the more I realize that we're very different and very the same.
Yeah.
And so just that passion of sharing this message about mental wellness and what it means and how it can be such a great part of our life and our spiritual life and
Yeah.
spiritual journey.
Definitely part of our spiritual journey, right? I think when we look at our health, it's both spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical, right?
Mhm.
And so that is important for us to be um, striving or working towards wholeness in all of those arenas of our health. And what do you think called you to be a counselor in the first place? Was there something in your life that happened, or have you always, as a little girl even, felt yourself called to be a counselor?
Yeah, you know how little boys that become firefighters are like, I knew it was me because when there was a fire, I wanted to run into the building and not run away. And I think that was my whole life. Like when friends were struggling, like even when my parents were struggling, I grew up with a dad with that was an alcoholic, and
Mm,
just like I always felt like, run in. What's going on? How can I help? Like, why are they feeling this way? I think I always had that why. And
mm.
then when I learned more what counseling was, I was like, I get to understand the why and help others. Like it was just like a firefight. It was I always knew that this was my path. Did I think it would turn the way and go the way it has? I don't know, but so glad that God has called me to this journey.
Beautiful, beautiful. And when we're working in our giftedness, right? They say it doesn't feel like you're working, but I mean, there's still a work there, but there's a life that comes to you. Don't you agree?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I remember at one point I had 3 kids, one with a special needs. I had moved away from my family. My husband traveled for work, and I went to adoration and told God my plan that like I was done. Like I'm not going to do this anymore. Like I just need to focus on this. I'm like overwhelmed. And he like, those moments when he really talks to you, he was like, "No." And I was like, "Oh, did you not hear my story? Like, I just told you all this I'm dealing with." He's like, "No, I need you. Like, you got to do this, and you're just going to keep going." And from that moment, I'm like, okay, God, I'm just going to keep saying yes to the doors you open and wherever it takes me. But it's taken all that stress because I'm like, okay, God, it's you and me.
Yeah.
We're walking this journey. Tell me where we're going.
And he equips us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that you felt that way in starting, being an entrepreneur alongside of all the other titles that you hold, but starting Sacred Heart Mental Wellness. Tell me a little bit about why you started it and what is the mission behind your, I don't know, do you call it a ministry or an organization, but the work that you do there?
Yeah, it started because God had put on my heart a long time ago that there were these main topics that if people knew, their mental wellness would be much better. Like I have client after client come in, and I would spend the first 6 weeks like teaching the same topics. And I just felt like, man, if I could get this out to the world, one, a lot of challenges could be averted because you'd have that mental understanding, but also what it would do is that when people started counseling, they could jump and get really going. They were already starting. I say like when you're swimming, like they already knew how to float, they already knew how to kick. So teaching them the backstroke was much easier. And also knowing that the pandemic was hard. So I'm sitting there in March 2020 watching things unfold as a counselor and going, okay, it was beautiful. Everyone pulled together. There was this unity, and we fight or flight response, and our body was ready. Then it kept going and it kept going. And I'm thinking, ooh, there's going to be mental health fallout from this. People are going to feel anxious. They're going to feel overwhelmed, depressed. Our bodies aren't created to be under that pressure for that long. And I was like, there's not enough of me. Like, there's not enough counselors. Like, they keep saying we need mental health help. And I'm like, yes, but our caseloads are full. We're worn out. We're going through it, right? Like, to your listeners, yes, you're supporting the kids, but you're supporting yourself too. Like,
Yes.
you had to go through this too. And I had to find a way to multiply myself. So, Income Sacred Heart Mental Wellness. I'm going to create these videos that will teach content. I will offer classes that are short, much cheaper than going to individual. I will teach this content, and then people will be able to have a foundation to either continue on their counseling process or have the building blocks. Like, you can't build a basement of a house without cement and 2x4s and nails. And yeah, you might have the contractor come in and put it together, but like when you have some of those basic tools,
Mm,
everything is so much easier. So
mm.
that's where I created it.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's so true that coming together, working with you or any other counselor to have already coming in with the mindset and the building blocks, right, and the foundation built, so you can get right to work, right, and
Mhm.
not spend so much time building and understanding concepts. Which I think one of those concepts that I know is pretty strong in the world, right, is that if I do struggle with anxiety or depression, that means I'm bad, I'm not good,
Mhm.
I'm something's wrong with me. And how do we change that narrative?
Shameless plug. You read my book, right? You gotta read the book. And the reason why, so how do we change the narrative is that the whole purpose of my book is to go into the biological reasons our body feels anxious, to understand that God made this response, this fight or flight response to save us when there is a bear. And
Mm,
it is good. And it, when he created us good in our mother's womb, like this was part of that plan to keep us alive. But sometimes it's not a bear.
mm,
Sometimes it's meeting the in-laws. Sometimes it's a talk at work. Right. And so if we can see that the reaction in and of itself is good, what I call the anxious response, like, okay, I can feel my tummy getting sick and my heart getting faster. And I can see how like this is all part of God's beautiful plan. Then I can get off the hamster wheel, which is I'm anxious. Oh no, I'm anxious and I'm anxious. Oh no, now I'm like really mad at myself that I'm anxious and that makes me more anxious. And now I'm, and like it just keeps growing, right? And what it's telling our body is like, there is a bear, there is a bear. And you're like stressing more and more, and you're pumping that, all those problems get worse. But if you could say, oh, I know what that is. My body thinks something's scary. My brain does, but it's actually not. So I'm going to use my senses to calm it and understand it. And then I can like make all those tools work.
mhm,
Right. So
mhm.
truly, my goal, if I was to say my overall goal, is for people to know that they are good they are loved, and that struggling with these things are human. I mean, my clients laugh at me because I think most days I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty human. Like, like that sounds pretty human. Like that's a reasonable response. Like, what are we gonna do with it? Like, we don't have to sit in that. And there's lots and lots of tools to help people. But if I think I'm no good, that's not going to happen. And the reason I use mental wellness is because if you said today, hey, I'm going to go get a personal trainer and go to the gym, no one would, they'd be like, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you, right?
Yep.
We don't do that with mental health,
Mm,
right? When you're having a heart attack, you don't go to the gym, right? You go to the gym to avoid a heart attack, to have that health. And so I want to change this mindset that there's something wrong. Maybe I just need to understand it.
yeah.
Maybe I need to know the tools. And when I can do all those things, I can manage this. I don't need to be a victim of my anxiety and it make all my decisions for me. I can understand it and I can feel empowered. And I can know that Jesus created a church that is like everything that they tell you to do for anxiety is like in our church. It's like he knew we were going to worry. Right? And so, like, in the book, I like tie those together in my
Oh,
presentations. I try to see, like, look at how God knew we were going to struggle. And instead of looking down on us and being like, you bad person, you shouldn't feel that way. He's like, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you this. Here's the graces. Here's all this you need to help because I love you and I want to help you. And
mm,
so my mission is to share that story and that image because it is not out there. Even with people struggling, it's still very like that's out there and I need to struggle alone.
mhm,
No, in a group
mhm.
of 100 people, when I talk, I'm like, how many people have anxiety? And they're all like, I'm like, yeah, all of you. I know it, you know it. But like they feel like it's just me. Like I'm
Yeah.
the only one, but they only knew. And I want to be
Right,
like,
right, right.
and I love you.
Well, because we put on a facade, right? We put on this appearance like everything is okay. I'm not worrying. I'm not afraid. And because that's sort of what society tells us, right? We should
Mhm,
be, or even like walking with someone who has anxiety and depression,
mhm,
and to say to them, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, come on, get out of
mhm.
bed or whatever. Like, so not helpful, right? I mean, or is that helpful? I mean, I don't know.
It absolutely is not helpful, and actually, like, when I made this book, when I made these courses, I thought about, what do I wish the moms knew who are
Mm,
worried about their babies? And I don't care if your baby's 40, 50, 16, 5, right? And you don't know how to help them. This book is to teach you, like, what do I say? Why do I say it? Why is it helpful to say, "You're safe"?
mm,
That's the best thing to say, and it sounds so weird because 'cause you're like, "Obviously, I'm safe, I'm at my house," but your something told your animal brain you weren't safe, and it could be a memory, it could be a smell, it could be a sound, it could be many things that, like, trigger that animal brain is, like is a term I use a lot that's, like, the part that keeps us alive, it's responsive, it's not, like, cognitive, you don't think through, and so I explain it so you can understand what's happening with that loved one when they have anxiety. That's why I'm wanting to get to start talking to the youth, talking to the people who work with the youth so that they can actually be helpful. Or I'm trying to reach priests. Like if you have a priest who is sitting in a confessional hearing anxious person after anxious person, and they come to me and they say, I have no idea. I don't know what to say to them to help. This book is going like was my first really thing to say, okay, here, this is going to give you everything you need to know. And oh yeah, it's 60 pages and full of information. So you don't have to feel overwhelmed reading these big long books or and there's amazing resources out there. There's great podcasts, there's everything. There's just a lot. I
yeah.
really tried to condense things.
Is the primary audience for your book, Kathryn, those people who are walking with anxious people, or would it also be for someone who's struggling personally with anxiety? Can it help them too?
I really tried to make it for both. So I broke the rules of every YouTube video that told me how to write a book was to pick this very narrow audience. because I kept saying, but they're all humans who don't know they're loved. That's my big audience, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really, I tried to make it so that it really fit in both, where like I can have a lot of like resources for myself, but then if I needed to read it for someone else that I could,
Okay.
or trying to help bosses understand their employees. And
Mhm.
it is like, and I hate to use this word because it has such like a negative connotation, but like it's going to be the next pandemic.
Yeah.
And I said that in March 2020 when it first happened, and everyone's like, "No, it's gonna be, look how well we're dealing with it." I'm like,
Mm-mm.
this is going to be hard. And so for anyone listening who's struggling, I want you to hear that it is okay and it is reasonable for you to be struggling right now. Don't be afraid to get the help that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Kathryn, why is it important to see this situation through a Catholic lens?
Because God made you good and you are loved, right? We live in a capitalistic society. And if you start thinking that you're good just the way you are, you're not going to buy those new jeans. Right? That's the reality, right? Like, what would happen to our society if we were just like, you know what? I'm beautiful the way God made me. And like, He knew when He was up in heaven making me. He's like, because He knew us before us in our womb, right? He knows our story. And He's like, perfect. And
Mm.
then we say, God, what are you talking about? You don't know. I'm supposed to be taller. I always wanted to be taller. I'm only like 5'3". I'm like 6'.
Okay, how tall are you? Because Zoom
I'm
virtual.
like 5'3", but I always wanted to be a volleyball player, except I have Puerto Rican descendant, there's height there, or athleticism. So I have to believe that God called me for another purpose than to be a professional volleyball player, but it is a dream of mine. But that's what we do is we look and we say, well, I have curly hair. I have some kids who have curly hair of my children, and some are straight. And of course, the straight ones want the curly want the straight.
Mhm.
You know, we need to see, like, why do we have to see it through the lens of God? Is because it is the only place where we can truly know that we are loved exactly how we are. And if you want to see someone's mind, like, just kind of really, like, is the moment they realize, like, I'm loved because He made me.
I'm worthy, right? I'm
I am
worthy.
worthy. I am enough.
Mhm.
And these feelings, one, don't make me not enough, but all those insecurities, they're in the book. We talk about rational versus irrational. They're like, I'm not a bad person because I'm short, right? I'm
Mhm.
a beautifully made person who happens to be 5'3". And I coach volleyball. I'm the thing, right?
All right.
And so we
And
have to start there in knowing that that we are loved and that God is
mm,
there. And then also there are so many of the tools that are like already weaved into our faith, right?
mm,
Like the rosary. Now, I know that there's so many spiritual benefits of the rosary, but let's talk about meditation. Let's talk about repetitiveness. Let's talk about cadence, right? It's like being rocked to sleep. It's like Mary's like, I got you, girl. I love you,
oh,
right? And so I talk in the book about how do we use the rosary, not just as a spiritual piece, like in addition, but like God knew we needed that. And
mm,
I even say, like, let's do it with an audio, right? Because what do most anxious people do? Did I do 9 rosaries, Hail Marys? Did I do 7? Did I do 11? Did I properly meditate on this? Right? Like they get so anxious about doing it right that they don't let Mary just love them,
mm,
moment with them, and
mm,
like be that comfort, right?
mhm,
And confession, it is so huge, and not just like for ourselves, like so we can release the shame that we put on ourselves, right? How much of our shame is put on us? Most of it
yeah,
is like, I'll wear that, I'll
yeah.
wear that, right? And so we talk about how confession is a huge part in managing anxiety and the
Mm,
sacraments and adoration. And just like one of my favorite things is going to like secular counseling trainings and just being like, oh, you're so Catholic, you don't even know. It's just like if they knew the church, they would know that like these just fit.
Right, right. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And like you said earlier, in scripture, right, we have so many times that the Lord tells us, fear not, trust me, right?
Mhm.
And we have that to lean into.
Yeah, and I even think I always give this example, especially if someone's coming to me with like a past that's just really hard to let go. And we talk about Mary Magdalene. So I'm
Mhm,
kind of a bad Catholic because Mary Magdalene's my favorite Mary. But like there's just something so powerful of God's love that like when he's dying on the cross, redeeming the world, and he could have anybody there,
mhm,
he picks her.
mm,
Like whenever I'm doubting, like, oh, but like am I really worthy? I'm like, he picked Mary Magdalene to be there. Like, it's just this beautiful, like, no, he like loves her
yeah.
and he sees her. He sees who she was made, like
Mm,
in just this loving, beautiful way. And so, yes, like the scripture, the saints, there's so much to say, like, oh, like it's not me. Like being a human is hard, but God gave us all the help we need.
right, right. Well, and he knew you and I would be living during this time of pandemic.
Hmm.
Each of your clients, all of the young people who we're serving, um,
Hmm.
and as parents, right, or youth ministers,
Hmm.
like we just have to ask him to equip us, right, to be able not only to manage our own
Hmm.
fears, anxieties, and challenges, but also how do I minister and love and show your love, right, to those people who my family, who I serve, who we're partnering with, who we do ministry with, right?
Hmm.
And and to be open to the working of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And as you talk about my mission, one of the reasons I want to get on campuses and I want to get the word out is that if we all start to have a common language
Mm,
around mental health that is positive and loving, then when you're talking to me, like I'm imagining, you got a minister and a student and you both know the same language and the minister goes, "Are you on the hamster wheel?" They're
yes.
like, "Yes, I am." Right? Like, and so it's like without having to go into this big long thing, you have these words that
Mhm.
you know. Like, is that your thinking brain? Is that your animal brain? We do some like exercises and different things to show the difference between the two. And so what we do is we start creating a conversation where it's like the word Nike. If I say Nike, 80 things about Nike. So I have a lot of like little word triggers that my goal is to create kind of a language around mental health that is positive and
Mm,
loving and inspirational, that also inspire your tools.
mm. That is great. That's great. And I think that there in so many areas, the redefining words and really understanding the
Mhm.
language is so important, so important. What are some signs or symptoms, Catherine, that I, as a parent or a youth minister, would want to keep a lookout for in my young person, whether it's my teenager, my middle schooler, that they might be struggling with anxiety and I don't know it.
Mhm. In all honesty, I would say if you have a teenager, I would assume they're struggling with some level of anxiety, and I
Okay.
would go in with that assumption first.
Okay.
Um, and so I think creating a natural language to talk about it, talking about your own is really important. So the key to me for a foundational would be making sure that your child knows it's okay and we can talk about this and it's normal. It's
Mm,
normal to feel this way. Let's start talking.
okay.
When I would get concerned is when they're not talking. I think a lot of times we belly trouble and we go into why tummy and digestive issues is highly related to anxiety and stress. And so a lot of times they'll have tummy trouble and they'll think it's just diet, which sometimes is a purpose. Like you need to talk to the doctor, but tummy trouble is a big thing. I think that you see isolation
Okay.
is a very big one. um, I think that when you have anxiety, you see them getting lost in their thoughts. Like when a paper's coming, they start and they say, "Oh well, like I get this paper, and if I don't get this paper done, then what's that going to mean? What's this going to mean?" And this,
Mm,
I think we're seeing a lot of social anxiety.
Mhm.
because people have been isolated a lot and now those groups are getting bigger. And so we have to retrain our brain that that's safe. I
Yes.
mean, really think what we taught our brains is like being out is dangerous and you could kill yourself or someone else. And that we can cognitively, like this, I'm not debating on those political pieces. I'm saying to our brains, we have to retrain and be like, okay, like it's okay for like I'm safe.
Right.
Um, so I think like seeing that isolation would be my biggest concern, and then listening to how they talk. So a lot of that, like if you're sensing any worry, I always advocate sometimes saying like, it's so, like I bet you're really nervous about this test. Like we think we're giving them the idea, but they're like, oh, I totally am. Like, oh, okay, like that's like, why are you nervous about, right? So my key always is if they're not talking, if your teen is not talking,
Mm.
that's always my biggest concern.
You make an interesting point because I struggle with this when I only have a 6-year-old, but still they can have, some worry too. And so I think, oh, if I ask him, is he nervous about his spelling test on Friday, or that morning, am I planting the seed that he's nervous, or am I just identifying that what he's already experiencing? You know?
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like to do that is to create this is for, like, younger kids, but I actually even do it with some older, you just have to convince them that it's cool, for those cool middle schoolers, I have 2 of them, is having a jar that's kind of like maybe your worry jar or your thoughts jar, right? And so I tend to put it by Mary or by, like, our statue, and so the idea is that we can take those worries and we can put them in the jar, and we'll just let Mary deal with them,
Oh, I love
right?
that.
Because sometimes they don't want, especially middle schoolers, high schoolers, they don't want to say it out loud. They
Mhm.
don't want to be talking to you. And depending on like, so with the little kids, a lot of times I'll say, I'm not even gonna read them. Like, let's just write them down,
Yeah.
right? And like letting them know that there's a safe place to do that. Or
Mm.
saying like, I may read them sometimes, I may not. Like the idea is, yes, I'm not saying don't ever read them, but I am saying giving them a safe place that they realize like we can have worries and we can put them down and then we don't have to carry them. I like to think of our brains kind of like a garden. So when I first moved to Kansas, I came from the city and you have to garden in Kansas. It's like a rule.
Oh.
And so I started this garden and it was 20 by 20, which was huge. If you've ever lived in the city, that's big, right? In Kansas, they're like, oh, it's so sweet and little. Oh, I'm like, huge. And in the spring, I love gardening, right? Because there's all these beautiful lines. The soil's recently tilled, and you can see where everything is.
Mhm.
But about July 15th in Kansas, it gets really hot and humid and buggy, and weeding becomes rather miserable.
Mhm.
And so I like to just stop doing anything with the garden about July 15th. And then by August, I don't know what is a vegetable. I don't know what is a weed. I don't know what anything is. And our minds are kind of like that. We
Mm.
get so many thoughts that are maybe good vegetables, maybe not, that it's hard to sort them through. And so those activities that help kids to sort out and like get it out on paper, then I can take it out of my brain and put it down. Like a cognitive, concrete thing to say, "Oh, Mary's got this." I also have
Mm.
to do that at night, because we solve the problems at night, right? Can we write them down and give them to Jesus for the night, and then I can pick it up in the morning?
Ah,
But the whole idea being like, it's okay to do this every night.
yes.
You don't do this when there's a problem. You do this to avoid the problem.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I can see where littles would really engage with it pretty easily.
Mhm,
But I could see as a parent or even as a youth minister that I would do it too, right? I would write down a worry or concern and put it in the
mhm.
jar, right, at night during prayer time or during your youth ministry time, or just like what a great opportunity again to weave our faith into our lives and to take the burden off and give it to the Lord.
Yeah, because the reality is there are things that we don't have control over,
Yeah,
right? Anxiety tells you just figure out how to have control over everything. And we keep trying, and then we're in quicksand because the more we try, the more we get into this quicksand, right?
yeah.
And
Yes.
so there's also an element of acknowledging, like, I can't do anything about this today. Like it's outside of my power, but like God can be working on it all the time. But I also don't need to carry something but I can't do anything about today. And I
Mm,
think as a youth minister, you have that a lot because you love these little souls, right? But you also have very little actual control over
mhm,
a lot of it. And so to be able to acknowledge that that's hard and to find ways to put them down.
mm.
So
That's
good.
I love
Mhm.
that we're ending on a something super tangible, right? Like if you walk away from nothing else from our time together today, like here's a simple action you can do in your home, you can do in your youth ministry program. You can, for a priest, he could give it as a penance to someone.
Yeah.
Like it's just a real tangible action item that can help with when you struggle with anxiety or fear. So I can see a lot of ways that you could use this jar too to lay things before our Lord and Our Lady. Kathryn, oh my gosh, you have been an absolute delight. I love your humor. I love your humor on a topic that I think most of us would consider to be kind of a heavy, weighty, um, kind of depressed kind of topic, right? And you bring such humor and joy. Thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And like I said, I want us to start being able to have the conversation and realizing that it is okay to laugh. It is okay to see the joys in our lives. Like this is good. And
Mm.
so thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Oh my gosh, you are so welcome. If people want to get your book or learn more about the work that you're doing and or take some of your online or view some of your online courses, where can they find you?
You go to Sacred Heart Mental Wellness, and all of it's there. There's also a place if they want to book me to come and
Mm.
do trainings for your staff, for your diocese, to buy bulk books. Like, I always think that my book is one of those that I would challenge most people aren't going to go buy, right? But they probably all need it on their nightstand. So I want to be the book that some parish is like, here you go. You need this, just, or I
Yeah.
see on a college campus, like if they're like, oh, I'm feeling it, here's this like good Catholic based way to acknowledge this. Like, I
Mm.
don't know how, not a lot of people yet are like, yeah, give me that. I want to read that book. But
Yeah.
I think like, it's so vital. They don't know how much they need it. So Sacred Heart Mental Wellness. And I also put a plug in if you are interested in this. I have a interview with Women of Grace with Jonette that's airing today and tomorrow, where I go into much more detail of like what is going on with the brain, how do we deal with it. There's much more like tangible pieces, and
Awesome.
and there's more stuff there. So
And they can find that on EWTN, right?
yes,
Oh my gosh. Congratulations on being interviewed there and on Jeanette's program. So congratulations on that. We will definitely in the comments, you'll see the website that Kathryn referred to learn more about the work that she's doing. And if you want to reach out to her, book her or purchase her book. So thank you so much. God bless
thank
you and your
you.
work. And just youth ministers and parents know that you are capable and to help yourself and others, your young people, and
Mhm.
we have the resources, we have the faith and trust that God will be with you to help them to walk through this journey of life and all of the challenges that come to us because we aren't going to make it through life without challenges. You know, we
Mhm.
lived through the pandemic, right? So we know, but there's going to be other things. Life is not over yet. So equipping ourselves with the tools to be able to be resilient
Mhm.
and that is what Kathryn can help you with. And I hope you've enjoyed our program today, everyone. We'll see you. A note, we are taking the rest of the summer off. So if you are, faithful listener to us or come back and do watch this as a replay, just know that we're going to take the rest of the summer off as we deliver both of our Steubenville Youth Conferences here in July. And we'll be back in the fall with new topics and new speakers. And I think we're going to have Kathryn back. There's so much we could talk more about. So God bless you all. Bye.